Now we're going to shift our focus back to football. And to do that, we brought David Hood with us from TigerNet.com. Of course, David is our go-to guy when it comes to all things that are going on with Clemson Athletics. He covers everything. He's on top of the recruiting. He's on top of the baseball program, the basketball program, the football program, past, present, and future. And now, David, good. All that Latin you learned in college is going good use too, because you get to cover things from a courtroom, as Clemson and the ACC have multiple court battles going on. The latest news you shared with us today, and that is that Clemson's case against the ACC will, at least for the time being, continue in Pickens County. So, David, welcome. And how did you feel being in that courtroom?
Well, so first of all, when we walked in, they told us that the media who had actually filled out requests to attend, we got to sit in the jury box. So it was very much a front row seat. And I took the seat of the jury foreman. So I felt like I was the foreman for everything that was going on today. But, I got to use a little bit of a Latin. Jim Cooney, who's a lawyer for the ACC, he brought out the res judicata today, and I thought, you know what, I think I know what that means, but Google is your friend. I had to use Google more than once for some of the things that they were talking about. But what I thought would be a boring day in court actually turned out to be fascinating, at least to me, as Clemson, for now, earns a win in court.
Yeah, David, maybe you can simplify it for us just a little bit, because we've tried to follow it, especially, there was some news coming out of the Mecklenburg County Court, and then obviously what you're covering directly there in Pickens County. How well can you put it in layperson's terms, just how it's going, I guess? How's it going for Clemson? How quickly will this get resolved? And if you were a betting man, what is the resolution at the end of this particular rainbow?
Yeah, so what we had in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina last week. Remember, Clemson is the one that sued the ACC first, and they did it in Pickens County in South Carolina. Well, then the ACC sued Clemson for breach of contract, and they did that in Mecklenburg County, basically Charlotte, in North Carolina. So what you had last week was Clemson asking the North Carolina courts to stay, not necessarily dismiss, but stay any type of litigation up there until South Carolina was heard. The North Carolina judge said no, it's going to continue, in North Carolina. Clemson has appealed that, so now it goes to the appellate courts in North Carolina. Today was almost the inverse of that because Clemson sued first. The ACC was asking the South Carolina court, the 13th Circuit Court, say that fast, to stay this. Or as Jim Cooney, the ACC lawyer, put it, can we just park this lawsuit to the side for a little bit until things are adjudicated in North Carolina? But the judge said, no, it's going to continue in South Carolina. There were several arguments, back and forth between the lawyers and the judge, everybody trying to plead their case. But in the end, it's going to continue to be heard in South Carolina. Now we wait on a schedule to see when the actual case can go forward regarding the grant of rights.
David Hood, senior writer for TigerNet.com, our special guest here tonight on Sports Talk, trying to piecemeal our way through the litigation between Clemson and the Atlantic Coast Conference. And David, I don't know if you've had these type conversations, but I'd be fascinated if you could get Dabo Swinney or Brad Brownell or Sean Poppy or any of the other coaches on staff in an honest moment. Do you think they're all excited about what's going on? I realize it's a money deal. Clearly, it's a money situation. But do you think those coaches, if you asked them and got an honest answer from them, they'd just be happy to stay where they are?
Yeah, probably there's a few, somebody of their old school happy to stay where they are. Mm-hmm. But, as much as everybody says, hey, this is ruining college football or it's ruining college sports, all of a sudden you think about an expanded league where instead of playing up at Syracuse, instead of playing Boston College, instead of playing Wake Forest, instead of playing Duke in football, now all of a sudden, you're replacing that with more high-profile programs, where this is all going to head at some point. I think the coaches will be excited about that. For me, man, I kind of cut my teeth in the ACC, and I hate to see all of this disappear. I do think it will. From a Clemson perspective, I think it will disappear. But it's also exciting to see where this is going and kind of see where it all ends up. And let's face it, no matter what happens now with Clemson, the Big Ten, the SEC, Big 12's not in play. Where we're all headed is to the super conferences. That's where we're headed. And there's going to be a league of 42 or 64, whatever. That's where we're going to be in 15 years. That's where we're headed.
I agree with you, David. I think we've all seen this one coming for years, so I don't know if this is going to be a moot point in 5 or 6 years anyway. But since you mentioned conference expansion to the point that we've gotten now, do you buy much of what you've seen coming out of the Big 12 that maybe that's the destination for Florida State and Clemson? That's some of the reporting that was coming out earlier this week from there.
No, I don't. As soon as some of that started to come out, I got a text message from somebody at Clemson, and it said, don't listen to that. It's just the Big 12 trying to stir the pot. And, that's something that you kind of have to listen to. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And so, this is what I have to tell everybody. People got excited this time last year about potential Board of Trustees meetings and leaving the conference, and everybody knows that August 15th date, right? So if you are going to compete in a different conference, if you're going to leave, you have to notify the ACC that you're leaving by the August the 15th of this year to compete in 2025, starting in fall of 2025. So everybody's trying to ramp this up and make it seem like, man, this has got to go fast unless Clemson wants to wait until 2026 or 2027. But when I walked into the courtroom today, one of the ACC representatives looked at me and said, despite everything that you're hearing, this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. That is echoed from the Clemson side. Like, this is going to take a while. And for all of the talk of the Big 12 or what's going to happen with the Big 10, Clemson has to find a way out of the ACC first. And in talking to people today, I said, hey, is this kind of a first step in bringing the ACC to the negotiating table and maybe getting it done sooner? And I was told, no, this really needs to play out. This needs to be decided by a judge so that there's, no appeals, nothing like this is just will be done. And so when I think you look at it that way, you're going to go, man, this has got several more months left in it. To me, the big date is February the 1st of next year, because at that point, ESPN has what you would call a look-in to the contract for the ACC. And they have a choice. They can either lower the media rights fees, they can increase it, they can keep it the same. And so what happens then? Well, let's say that they lower the media rights fees. Well, then that would give Clemson and Florida State and North Carolina or whoever else a really good reason in court to jump out of the league. So to me, I kind of look at that February 1st date as maybe the next big important one.
David, that is something we have not been talking about. Now, one thing I mentioned, and again, we are certainly talking out of school because I think you just laid out all the reasons why this has to play out in a courtroom. And so all of us, we're just going to be bystanders for a while. But one thing I brought up is I did wonder if it wouldn't be in ESPN's best interest to prevent their media rights deals going public and having that exposed everywhere, that it might be in their best interest to try to keep Clemson and Florida State in the ACC, and as a last-ditch effort, going back to the table and reopening the negotiation with the ACC to redo the deal to get them closer to the payouts that the SEC and Big Ten receive. Do you think there's any chance, any Hail Mary chance of that happening, or is this just going to be a divorce that plays out in front of us over the next 3-5 years?
Well, I do think it's going to be a divorce that plays out, but yeah, that is a wild card, and we all know that behind the scenes, it's the networks that are pulling the strings. Whether it's Fox trying to get a Clemson or North Carolina or Virginia or Florida State to come up to the Big Ten, or whatever happens, with the Big 12 or ESPN, ABC with the SEC. Those are the guys that are kind of making the behind the scenes decisions. And it could be a point where ESPN goes to the ACC and goes, look, we don't want to air this dirty laundry. We don't want this to go any further. and somehow they facilitate a move for some of these schools. And that's the part that's interesting to me. I flew out when Clemson played in the Elite Eight with one of the movers and the shakers to Los Angeles, flew out on the same flight as them. And, they seemed to hint to me at that point that, as much as this was being decided in the courts, it was also being decided in the boardrooms at ESPN and Fox Sports.
Wow.
David Hood. I know. I love it. Hey, you said super conference, David. Why don't we just all call it what it is? You're going to have Conference ESPN, Conference Fox, and Conference CBS, and then they can play for a national championship.
That's probably the way it's going to be.
And David, do we want that? Do we want ESPN and Fox having that much power where they can manipulate and move chess pieces across the board and move schools from conference to conference?
I don't think you want it, but I think that's kind of where we're at. Now that the Pandora's box, and I'm all for the players being paid, but now that box is open, and now you've got recruits who've never set foot on campus demanding $1 million or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I heard the other day that a quarterback's going on the market for $9 million in NIL. You're making more than 75% of the quarterbacks in the NFL, right? Like that's incredible to me. But now that that's kind of been opened, the money's got to come from somewhere, and money talks right now.
There you go. David Hood joining us, TigerNet.com. Great stuff. David, will continue to follow your reporting both on Twitter and at TigerNet.com. And, of course, wherever Clemson football, whichever conference Clemson's playing in, you'll be there, and we'll see you there.
Thanks, David.
I'll see you guys. Bye-bye.
ESPN conference. Interesting. Fox conference. I had never considered that as a possibility, Smitty, but David's idea makes a lot of sense. Scary that those guys have that much power, but it makes sense.